So let's talk about point number one, you guys, a value proposition. And there's a trick question that I mentioned before. What do you charge your sellers? So I was jotting down some notes, you guys, and let me run through a list because I approach this differently. I've done a similar presentation before. This one's going to be a little bit more comprehensive. So things that people don't think about, let's just aside from the transaction. All right, aside from the transaction, what does a professional real estate agent bring to the table that may be overlooked by a potential seller? And I wrote down several things here, and this list isn't exhaustive. I just did this in a couple of minutes when I was having lunch today. Number one is our perspective. Now, what's interesting, you guys, is that we take it for granted, the perspective that we have on this industry. Yes, the public thinks that anyone can be a real estate agent, and they're absolutely right. Anyone can throw a football. Not that many people can throw a football and get paid for it, right? So when we're doing business over and over again, we have a level of understanding and perspective that only comes from experience. So you write down perspective and then also put a slash skill. This is a skill sport. Bowling is a skill sport. We had our awesome event this past weekend. We had a COVID-friendly drive-through Santa event, right? Where cars came in with their families, and we had Santa, the golf cart, and we had 80 to 100 cars come through. It was awesome. So I was talking to an individual there and he had an interest in real estate. Now, Sonny, you know who I'm talking about because you've talked to him, you met him, and his gig is surfing. I was talking to a gentleman last night at dinner who just got back from Mexico, and he was trying kite surfing. I have really never done either one of those. I stood on a skateboard before. I've never done kite surfing. I've never done surfing. And he wants to become a real estate. The surfer wants to become a real estate agent. I asked him the question, talking about perspective, you guys. To be a successful surfer, you can boil it down to one thing. How many falls are you willing to have? I said, what would it take? Would you have to go through 500 falls? He said more. He said thousands. It reminds me basically of the 10,000 hour rule, where in our business, you guys, is this: to get that bigger piece of cheese that we had there just a few minutes ago, we have to be willing to go through the 10,000 no's. And what's N-O's, N-O, right? No. Because that will give us perspective. And then I found the conversation interesting. And you're good at something that I'm not good at, right? And so he started talking about the nuances of surfing, how to sit on that board and watch. And he used the terms, read the ocean, right? I mean, I can see a wave if it's getting ready to come. However, they don't come in patterns, and you got to wait for the good one. And it only takes experience. And what angle is it going towards the beach? He was filling me full of all kinds of knowledge I had no idea about, because I've never surfed before. Put that into the real estate realm. Yeah, people watch HGTV. They sell a house every 7 to 10 years, and they think they did a great job because they sold it. Well, anyone can give their house away, right? So we have perspective. We understand how to read the ocean, so to speak. We're watching multiple transactions. We're feeling the energy of the market. Don't underestimate the fact that a professional sees things that the non-professional does not see. Anything from your hairstylist to the radiologist who reads an x-ray, they'll spot that little thing in the x-ray and it looks nothing more like a white something, a piece of cotton. That's perspective. Number two, experience. Well, with that perspective, we don't get perspective without experience. Now, the thing I like about the group of you guys on this call is this, and there's many that have been on multiple calls. And that's because you do not master something with one or two classes. And this is all about, and you'll see as I unravel kind of the new branding we're going to come out with. They tested a lot of words. And one of my favorite words, you guys, is mastery. So levels of experience, getting our 10,000 no's or our 10,000 falls going into surfing, gives us experience and perspective. Number three, you guys, is focus. Now, when somebody who does not understand real estate, a for sale by owner, a seller that wants to sell it on their own, a brand new agent, I mean, it's kind of like the real estate market is moving very quickly. There's a lot of moving parts. However, what happens, the more experience you have and the more perspective you have, the game slows down. We know what to focus on. And case in point, we've had in our presentations before, when the sellers, there's only 3 outcomes. And we've talked about that before. We have a sheet for that. In our closing for buyers and sellers, we have a checklist. We know what to focus on. When a contract comes in, you guys, and they can hire an attorney to do the contract. And do they understand it? Absolutely not. However, when we have a contract that comes in, we're representing the seller. We know if the pre-printed contract says all appliances, but it doesn't list washer and dryer. How many people out there have made a mistake, even the real estate agent that screwed up in the contract by excluding or not including things that should have been, and the MLS said one thing, the contract said another. There was no focus. Again, that's a huge ingredient that we bring to the real estate transaction. Talking about questions, another intangible, what's the word I'm looking for? An intangible advantage the seller has to work with us as a professional agent is we have that same ability of focus and perspective and experience when it comes to qualifying a buyer. How many transactions have you seen when the inexperienced agent on the other side, they're working with a buyer that they think are qualified or not? How many stories have you heard where a seller or a for sale by owner has accepted an offer from a buyer and you clearly can see it wasn't a good contract, it wasn't a fair contract? Many times they'll do a contingency and it's not worded properly, and there's issues with the buyer. They don't find out about it till later. That is a huge benefit. How would you like to go to the doctor that basically maybe amputates your thumb and basically it really only needed a Band-Aid and some methylate? I bet you haven't heard that word in a long time. That's called qualified, asking the right questions. And the other is, the last one I have here before we go into the transaction is this. Imagine talking to a potential seller. We give you safety. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you fly commercially, you don't really worry. I mean, you might be nervous about flying. However, you know the people in the front are qualified. And the more you've been in a plane, you realize there could be some bumps, this, that, and the other. However, you feel safe because you've got a professional in charge of it. When you're any other type of profession, sit down and get your hair cut, you feel safe because they're qualified. That is called peace of mind. And that's worth something. All of those things, you guys, can add dollars to the transaction. It can also add quality of life. So when we're talking about our value proposition, I want you to, stick your chest out and you thump it if you need to realize that you are free. In fact, you put money, in my opinion, into the seller's pocket. It's just our ability to be able to communicate, articulate that to a seller who's got their mind made up. However, our questions will lead them to the right answer. So what I'd like to do is go through, and I'm going to give you, and this is the easy way to kind of remember this. I've got maybe 8 or 10 things here that I want to go down and have you write down. And it's, as we talked about today in our role play, it follows the transaction. And we had some great discussion in our role play practice today about, wow, if it was a certain personality, like a D personality or driver, you wouldn't go through all of those. It's absolutely right. I'm going to give you a number of things that you could talk about with your seller going through the value proposition, understanding you may not have to use them all. I just want to give you 8 or 10 of them. And I'm sure the seller will be crying uncle sooner or later before you get to them. So let's just talk about it. Think in terms of the order a seller would have to go through these things. So number one, if you're talking to a seller that has not listed yet, one of the first decisions they have to make is the initial asking price. If it's a for sale by owner, most likely, if they've already have it on the market, they already have an initial asking price. So that house, if they're meeting with you on the for sale by owner, it's on the market. Only 1 of 3 things can happen. Outcome number 3, meaning it's not sold. So it's going to be outcome number 1 or outcome number 2, or maybe they haven't given it enough time. All right. However, everything we do, what we're going to go through is we're going to basically chip away at, quote, the money they're going to save. And if I had to start at the beginning, I should go back one step. Forgive me for this. If the role play happened today, and this is very, very typical, the seller was attempting to save $30,000. It was a $500,000 transaction. So it's very normal that the seller would save, want to say that 6% is $30,000. That's how they look at it, right? So if you're having to deal with how you can, with all your marketing, all your glamour and all your charm and all the things you can do, can save them $30,000. Well, if you can do that with just your marketing and your charm, that's awesome. However, I'm going to give you some tangible ways of how to, in order that you can remember these, that you can chip away at that. And one of the first things you want to do is get rid of the fact that it's not a $30,000 savings. Everything that I'm going to walk through, and then we'll do a role play, is going to be on a very conservative side. Because if you go too crazy on, the seller may not agree with you. However, they can't argue if you're super, super duper conservative. So number one, the question you want to find out, all right, so I understand you want to save 30,000, going back to our model, I understand there's the acknowledgement. If you want to isolate any other reasons, let's just assume that that's the number one reason. Your first position must be, and this is the easiest way to get it from 30,000 to 15, is, well, I understand that if I were to bring you a buyer that would be with an offer satisfactory to you, would you be willing to cooperate with my broker? Now, most of the role plays, many of the sellers, I'd say a high percentage of sellers would say yes. Then this next step you would do is get some clarity on what that might be. Don't assume, again, there's no set fee, as you know. Don't assume it's 2.5 or it's 3 or it's 2%. Ask them. And then you want to basically see if you can't get them to agree to pay what is half relative to how you do your business, right? And that's not hard to do. It's just a couple different questions. And one of the stats that you can quote that I believe is accurate, I don't remember the exact number. However, clearly the large percentage of for sale by owners or unassisted sellers, homes are sold with the help of a real estate agent. And we could go down there and tell you why, because there's 4 types of buyers. I'm not going to do that right now. There's serious in a hurry, serious not in a hurry, investors, and looky-loos. And there's a script for all that. However, I'm going to skip that. However, that's the discussion you would have with your seller if they wanted to know why such a high percentage. I've heard numbers as close to 80%, 90%, or whatever. I'm careful that if I'm going to be teaching you guys, I want to make sure I'm coming from integrity. I don't remember the number. I'll have to look for it. It is wildly more than the majority, right? So if the seller is willing to basically pay a fee to the buyer's agent, in reality, he's not going to save, or she's not going to save $30,000, right? She's going to save, or he's going to save half of that. Once they come to that point, then you want to ask them, then basically what you're attempting to do is say 15. Is that right? If you can get to that point, you can start doing a happy dance and burpees if you want to, figuratively in your mind, because we're going to be able to get down to the fact that you're free very rapidly. And here's the order. The first one would be the initial asking price. And the script is, and this question is, okay, so ask them how they're going to price the property. And what if, then you say, okay, based on the things I've talked about before, perspective, experience, focus, et cetera, do you think basically, do you have any fear at all that you might underprice it? I mean, and a question that came up from one of my team members today, which I thought was awesome. The question you would ask your sellers, particularly in this market, listen, are you familiar with how fast the market's moving up? And they're most likely going to say no, because not many people know. And that's a great way to let them know, well, the market's been up 15%, 12% or whatever. In fact, the article that I quoted a week or two ago into the third quarter was up 12%. So is it possible, Mr. Seller, that your initial asking price might be a little bit low by 1, 2, or 3% because the market's moving so quickly? And that's absolutely true. And then I always back down to, well, would it be unreasonable to expect maybe a seller? Now, notice I say a seller, I don't use them as an example. You could say that you could underprice it by 1%. And if they agree to that, what you've done is now gone from 30,000, you're at 15, from 15, you're taking off another 5, you're only $10,000, and you're only at the beginning of the list, right? Write this down. There's 3 points of negotiation. So the next one then is going to be, and for a for sale by owner, by the way, you can still have a conversation because if it has not sold, they're an outcome 1 or outcome 2. Both of those 2 outcomes, they have to make a decision, don't they? They have to then reposition. Well, the reposition is the same activity as the initial asking price. I mean, they have to pick a number. Is it possible your next number you pick could be off by 1 or 2%? Let's just assume it's off 1%. Could you see a seller could do that? So there's $5,000. And again, then you're going to have to be able to show them how you work. And remember, when we have our pricing guide up there and how we basically have point A and point B, we have top value, you can demonstrate how you can strategically come down to a point where you're approaching that top dollar mark. And you know, when you start getting to that top dollar mark, what's going to happen? You're going to get showings, and then the closer you get to it, you're going to get an offer. That's how you know you're going to sell it at top market value. And that's one of our team's specific value propositions is with that pricing theory, I can guarantee a seller that we can sell it at top value. So that's number one, is the initial asking price. The second one may be when the contract comes in, you're going to have a negotiation that comes in, and then you ask the questions around negotiation. And are they a professional negotiator? The agent that comes in, are they going to be more friendly towards you or more friendly to the buyer they've been driving around and having lunch with for the last 10 days? So is it possible? I mean, is it conceivable that because you're going up unrepresented, like in court, to a professional negotiator, that a seller can negotiate a contract 1 or 2% less than maybe a professional could do? And that would be absolutely yes. So now you've gone another % off, right? So we're really down to 1, and I've got 6 more to go. Let me just give them to you real quick. Excuse me. And then I can demonstrate this in a role play, and you can see how it works out. So that would be the presentation of the initial offer. So that would be negotiation, also understanding the mechanics of the offer. Is it possible that because they don't understand the contract, like I said earlier, that they may be automatically having to leave the avocado green refrigerator that's in the garage, or a washer and dryer, et cetera, or something, because it's not properly written up. They don't understand the paperwork. All right, so when the offer is presented, they have to negotiate that. The second point of negotiation is the inspection. That's basically, there's something magic, if you call it that. Maybe it's black magic that happens when a seller and a buyer buy and sell a house. Number one, the buyer, they both get some sort of what's called buyer-seller remorse. The buyer thinks, or they worry, I may have overpaid. And they take it out on the seller through the inspection. So in their mind, well, I'm giving that seller, in their mind, it blows up into the fact that they think they got taken advantage of, or they worry they pay too much. So when the inspection comes, this is their opportunity to go and get back some of that money they think they left on the table. And so that's always why this is the second point of negotiation. Sellers, on the other hand, they go to bed and they start talking to each other. Well, and I think we gave the house away. That house down the street sold for X, and our house is nicer. And I think that agent just talked us into it. So you know what? God darn it, we're not going to come on. We're not going to fix a spider web. So what happens is you've got the Hatfields and the McCoys that happens during the inspection. You all know what I'm talking about. You've had this happen. You've had maybe another agent on the other side of the transaction that does not have control of their buyer, and the buyers come in, they want everything done. It's a house built in 1920. They wanted to have it like a new house. Sellers don't want to fix anything. So can you understand when that happens, Miss Seller, that a seller unrepresented, a seller without perspective may agree to fix some things they don't normally have to fix. It may cost them a few $100s. Let's say it only cost them 0.5%, right? It could cost them a couple grand. And besides that, as you know, I mean, sellers are the worst at showing their home. That's why we want them out. That's why when people go to see it, you know, and then they're lucky they can sell their home anyway, because they have to take them through every home and every room in the home and make sure they see every closet. So when the inspector's there, what does an untrained seller do? Volunteers to fix things that they don't necessarily have to fix. That's why obviously we do our best to have the sellers out of there. So point of negotiation. Then if they're using financing, particularly with the upward moving market, the third point of negotiation is the appraisal, is the appraisal. There's a question around that, because the first thing the buyer is going to do is they're going to go back and attempt to get some money off the transaction. So let me give you the rest of them to write them down. So these are all points of which separate a professional real estate agent from somebody who does not do it for a living. Understanding the key dates. You guys out there that have systems, you know how contracts are pretty date specific. And if you miss a mortgage contingency, you miss any kind of contingency, it puts the contract in jeopardy. That can be very expensive. Can you see how that could affect basically the validity of your contract? Particularly, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, when you're attempting to move to St. Louis, and because you don't watch the key dates, you think everything's fine. And you know what? The buyers drop out because, you know, they had an extra long, they had a mortgage contingency date that equaled or was post-dated past the closing date. We've all seen that before, right? How about when you get into a situation where somebody's closing didn't happen and, you know, it's an occupied home, or maybe it's not an occupied home. You have to get into the discussion of allowing the buyer in early or allowing the seller to stay past closing. Can you see how that can blow up? Would you know how to handle that? Would you know what kind of risks are involved? Would you know what paperwork you would need to make sure you could handle it pre or post closing possession? How about the paperwork? I mean, they're going to have someone hired to do the paperwork. I don't think they're just going to go to LegalZoom and do a contract for their home. So there's going to be some money there. How about how about, do they have a good handle on the trades they're going to need to fix stuff in the house? I mean, right now, everyone's busy. Are they going to know who to call? What are they going to pay for that? Is it possible the agent has their handyman, these specialties that will go ahead and fix your roof instead of making you have to buy a complete new roof and save you money? Is it possible that their agent's going to save you on that particular category? Absolutely. How about post-closing liability? If a seller were to do it on their own, yes, they could hire an attorney. There's some money, or they may have a brother-in-law or title company help them. And the issue may be, what if they forgot to disclose something? Is it possible? It can happen, right? And that could come back to haunt the seller. And wouldn't you like to be able to sleep at night knowing you don't have to worry about it? That, again, goes back to that safety issue. And the last one I have, and you can come up with more, what about their time? We did a role play today, and one of the guys on the role play, you know, he could hear almost the violins playing in the background as far as what do you like to do in your weekends? Or I like to take the family and do this. Okay, so, well, what are you going to do when you've got that plan? Then the next thing that happens is somebody wants to see your home. And he went on to make the statement, and this is why I love doing this, because I hear things and it makes me think. He says, wouldn't it be worth peace of mind to have that quality time and hiring someone like me to do this? And I said, well, that was an awesome script you used. However, here's the idea. Here's how I would plus that. What if you said, how would you like to have your cake and eat it too? Well, what do you mean? I mean, how would you like to be able to go to the beach and spend time with your family, not worrying about showing the house for the weekend when somebody wants to come through for the 4th time. And here's the thing. I'll pay you to do it. You'll pay me? Yes, because probably through this whole transaction, you're going to make several $1,000s more. Let's just say 1% more. Not only are you going to save the 3%, you're going to make 1% more than if you did it on your own. So I'm going to pay you 1% to go spend time with your family. How would that be? So you follow what I'm saying? So I'm going to stop before I do a role play. Unmic yourself if you want. Give me some feedback. Give me some questions. Give me some comments. And then we can role play that. Then we'll go into the other 2 little issues we want to talk about today.
Hey, Denny, is there any liability to making promises over paying people? And then if the offer comes out less than what you promised, is there any liability for that?
Well, the question I hear on that is this: how do you know what they would have done? Now, remember, we're not giving them a price, right? I don't guarantee them a number. Like, I guarantee you it's $500,000. I don't do that. And I ask the question, well, do you think it's possible that a seller could leave 1% on the table? Do you think when they come back because the appraisal is low, that the seller will capitulate? And so I'm not stating everything is a fact. However, the other thing that I'm hearing in that question is, you don't know what that seller would have done without you. Is it possible they could have done a lot less? So I think it's an excellent question. However, do you see where I'm coming from on how I'm answering that?
Yes, very clearly. I just want to be very careful if I use that technique.
Right. Awesome point. And again, remember, we set expectations, don't set prices. So, and that's another class, and we can do that some other time. However, yeah, good question. Who else has got a comment or question? Nobody? All right. Well, then let's take maybe do a quick 5-minute role play.
Denny, I posted one.
Mark?
You know, that sometimes the seller might accept an offer where the property is subject, the closing is subject to the buyer's closing on their existing home, and they don't realize what can happen from that.
Yes, and that happens a lot. And how many times have you run into sellers that, you know, well, I had it under contract, and they take a stupid contract, right? So like a contingency or something, yeah, subject to their closing. So who would like to be a seller, and we can even, who would like to be an agent, and see if you can follow the roadmap on some of those things, and let's demonstrate this. We'll take 5 minutes. Do I have a volunteer? Seriously?
I'll do it, Danny. I'm a newbie, but I'll do it.
All right, Jay, can you be, all right, which one you want to be? You want to be the agent, or you want to be the seller?
I'll be the seller.
Chicken. Okay.
Yeah. All right, I'll be the agent.
Who?
It's Jay. I'll be the agent.
And I need a seller. I'll tell you what, I'll be the seller. I'll help you out, Jay. I'll be a real marshmallow.
Okay.
All right. Hey, listen, I don't want to, I appreciate you coming over. I'm not going to list the house. I mean, this market's pretty hot. I think I'm just going to do it myself.
Well, Danny, why would you do it yourself? I mean, are you prepared to drop the contracts and follow all of the stuff that you'd have to do in terms of preparing for when you get the offer and closing the offer? I can do all that for you.
All right, guys. So are we okay with this? I've just watched him stand on the surfboard, and so this is how we learn. So you heard what he said. However, now let's go back and start by following the model, Jay. I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
So what's the first thing?
Acknowledge.
Right. And we'll say that would be what? Just acknowledge it. I understand. I understand. There you go.
Okay.
And then how Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so then when you go to the isolation, demonstrate to Jay the isolation. Did you hear what I had to say? Because you might have been, maybe didn't hear it.
So Jay, other than saving the commission, is there any other reason why you wouldn't list with me today?
Right. So just write down, other than that. That's all you have to remember, other than that. All right. Well, to make it simple, I'll say no. Okay. So Jay, now we're going to go into, I've isolated. Now let's address it. What was the first thing? How do we start whittling this big $30,000 commission down to pieces? What would be the first question you want to ask me?
Well, there's going to be a buyer's agent that brings you an offer, more likely than not. So that's going to be 3% right there.
Well, you made a statement, however, that's right. Yeah, and you could do that. Well, okay, I'll buy that because that would work. That would work, Jay. Well, listen, Jay, if you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you 3%.
Okay, but the reality is that on average, without a agent representing you, you're gonna end up selling your place for 15% less than you otherwise would.
Okay, how do you know that? Or where do you get that?
That's not the national average for
I
FSBA.
don't know that to be true.
I heard that from Gene Rivers, actually.
Well, okay, that's interesting. So okay, and he might be right. I haven't seen that research. So let's just, however, you did make it. Did you ask me a question or make a statement?
I made a statement.
Right. So let's follow the model we talked about real quick. What did you just do? I'm going to pay you 3%. So what am I attempting to save?
Yeah, other than paying the 3%, is there any other reason you wouldn't want to have an agent representing you?
Well, then I want to save the money. I want to save. I guess I got to get to save $15,000. And if I pay you 15, I'll save 15. Then we'll both win. How's that, Jay?
Well, what if you could make more money?
Now that's an interesting question. That's an intriguing question. Even in a role play scenario, that made my ears perk up. It's kind of like asking me, well, what if you could grow more hair on your head? Like, oh, I'm listening now. Well, what do you mean?
What if you could actually put more money in your pocket by having an agent represent you in a normal commission?
All right, that's two good questions in a row. Okay, it's almost like Tom Brady right now. All right, well, what do you mean?
Getting you top dollar for your property that you otherwise wouldn't get.
All right, well, how would you do that?
By being able to market your property the way it should be marketed. And
Now, this is me, you guys. I'm a little weird. You can use that. I never use the marketing one. I mean, I notice I didn't even talk about marketing because I don't think marketing sells houses. And in this market, anyway, you can use it. So I won't give you any red marks on your paper. However, just for the people, Jay, great questions. The initial pricing, right? Understanding the contract, negotiating the offer, negotiating the inspection, negotiating the appraisal. Each one of those could basically cost me, the seller, the money. So those are the types of things I'm demonstrating. And this is not the only way to do it. Jay's path would work for him, I'm sure. I just wanted you to see how I would be putting these questions into the seller's mind. That's what you're doing, is you're planting doubt. All right. So then, okay. So I'm going to go down your path for one more minute, Jay.
Okay.
What marketing are you going to do that I can't do?
Social media. We're going to put it all over social media. And most importantly, the top realtors that I deal with on a daily basis, I'm going to go out to them. I'm going to reach out to them immediately and try and sell your house.
Okay. Any comments from anyone on that? And we'll go into the number two. Go ahead.
Did you make any reference to the other side of the commission?
He could have cut that off. I said I'd pay him. I'd pay him the 3%. So basically, I was going back to he's attempting to save the 15 grand.
I'm getting a lot of that on the forced market, working with distressed and notice of foreclosures. I'm getting on that a lot.
That they're not going to pay a buyer's agent?
Exactly. They only want to pay one side, like the exact 30,000. I'm hearing that kind of stuff more from that market.
So they only want to pay 15,000, right? Are you saying they will pay the buyer's agent or not?
Yeah, they're only looking at one side of the commission, not like there's two sides. So if the commission is 3%, they're thinking that's the total versus there's two sides. Like a dentist, kind of when the dentist comes in and charges you for one tooth, and he says, "Oh yeah, it's going to be $600 for the new crown." Then he tells you, "Oh yeah, but that's 600 for the left, and then 600 for the right, but that's after he already started drilling."
So are you saying that they think it's only 3% total? 1.5%,
Exactly.
1.5%?
Exactly what I'm negotiating with.
Yeah, you might have that type of situation in your market where the commission is that low. Again, whatever it happens to be, you can cut it in half if they have to pay an outside broker. I just want to make one statement. Jay, thanks so much for joining us on the role play. It didn't sound like you're that new because you asked some awesome questions. Just from my theory standpoint, how do I say this? The things that Jay was saying, and a lot of agents will tell them, well, I advertise on social media. I talk to these other agents. I'm just going to say it, okay?
You're not going to hurt my feelings, Denny.
It really, I wouldn't want to. That's not why. It doesn't matter that means nothing. Here's what I want you guys to know. You're building a house of cards with that. Now it might work. Just understand it does not cause that house to sell faster. It does not. Pricing, strategic pricing will. And that's the differential advantage. And again, does it help? It doesn't hurt. Like, for example, case in point, my wife is looking for a home in Phoenix. She went and looked at a house and it was at night, and one of the junior agents, brand new, some young guy, and probably hasn't had a lot of experience. Here we go with experience, right? There's no electric, and she's attempting to see the home with her cell phone flashlight. And she goes out to the pool, and there's frogs in a pool, and it looks like the people just moved out. Now, what kind of impression would that be? She was totally turned off with the house because her first impression, and she was excited to see it because the photos looked awesome. And here's where the professional agent came in. This is one of the things we can do. Her agent said, well, tell you what, why don't we get our stager and let's go look at the home in the daylight. The lead listing agent was there. I guess the electric wasn't off. The breakers were off. She was there. She staged the home properly. It was daylight. She had the fireplaces going. Instead of seeing it in the dark, she saw it in a, quote, different light. Made all the difference in the world. That type of thing does help because we're skilled in getting them back into the right environment. Where a for sale by owner wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because they don't have the skill in which to do that. I just want you to know that when I build my presentation up, every one of those points, there's about 8 or 9 of them are 100% possible and 100% taking money out of a seller's pocket. I don't, on my particular listing presentation, and I'll go on to the next thing here. I don't build it on marketing. I don't build it up on marketing because they'll think marketing has something to do with selling the home.